Hi, today I'm going to show you how to smoke ribs. So ribs are fairly easy to do, and the only real tricky part for smoking ribs is when to take them off, but we will talk about that later. So now we're just going to prep the ribs. So we have baby back ribs. I got these from Costco, and I like Costco baby back ribs because they take the membrane off. And I think in a real little how-to video on how to smoke ribs, they would show you how to take the membrane off, but I'm just lazy. And I like it because the membrane's already off, and Costco has really good meat. And really good ribs. So the Costco pack comes in a 3-pack, and that for a lot of people that's going to be too many ribs. So you would so we have usually about 7 to 10 people, and we usually have leftovers. So so what I'll do though is that we'll cook all 3 ribs or all 3 racks of ribs, and then we will just save them for the next day, and you can reheat them in your smoker, or if you're short on time you can just throw them back in your oven, and ribs are great the next day. So the first thing you want to do is, this is straight out of the package, so I'm just going to kind of take a paper towel and I'm going to wipe it down. So you want to get any excess moisture off of them. So you just kind of tap it like this. And I'm going to do the back side. Just kind of tap it. Just kind of gets the excess blood and other moisture off the rib there. So, okay, so that's all tapped down. And then, so next you want to do is you want to just feel your rib here. I'm wearing non-powdered gloves. So in barbecue, that's basically, you start using those for everything. So your hands just don't, you don't have to wash them every other second. And they don't smell like barbecue all day long. So just kind of look and see like if there's any bones protruding. Sometimes when they cut these at the meat plant, one bone will be out, leaving out, or sticking out there. And then you want to see if there's any little like flaps of skin. So I've got my bone knife here. So what I'm going to do is take one of these off now, and so we're looking for just like extra flaps of skin. So like here on the end, so you see I have these real thin pieces of meat here. So you could just leave that on. I mean, if you're like in competition, which I've never done, but the professionals, what they will do is they will trim like the last rib to just really square it up to make it look good for competition. But these are just backyard ribs. But even so, so what you want to do is, let's see, I have this real thin piece of skin here, or meat, and all that will do is that'll just turn into char. And I guess if you're really into like a burn-ins type thing, then maybe you'll just leave it on there, but we're just gonna take that off right here. I'm gonna take that off. So it's great to have this really sharp knife. So just take that off there, trim that up. And then, so that looks all nice and square right there. Just kind of look around, and this one looks pretty good. Sometimes you'll get ones that, like the meat, like has huge flaps on the side, You just have to determine if it's thick enough to leave it on, and again, because it's not competition. So, or if it's super thin, then it'll just turn to char, and so you just get rid of it. And you know, and if you got family over and you want it to look pretty, then you can trim it up too, so it really looks like you know what you're doing. Okay, so this one was easy. So you can turn it over here. Like I've got this little piece of fat there. I don't really worry about fat on ribs. They're nothing but what flavor. So, you know, like if we were doing a brisket or something, then you had the hard fat that won't really render. Then you would take that off. But with ribs, this is all soft fat, and it'll all render down really nicely. This will all be gone. You won't have to worry about this at the end there. It'll just kind of melt and then kind of coat the outside of the ribs there. Okay, so we're all trimmed up. And then what you want to do is you want to use some cider binder. For pork, I always use mustard. Just a simple, you could use generic, it doesn't have to be any brand, mustard. And then like if you're doing, sometimes when people do beef, they use like an olive oil or something like that. But basically you don't taste the mustard. The entire purpose of the mustard is to just have your seasoning stick to the ribs. So actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the bottom first. So you wanna do the bottom first so that when you flip it over, it does not ruin your rub, and it looks pretty. So we do the bottom first. So I'm just gonna take it, and you want the whole thing. You can apply like a super liberal thing of mustard. Again, you're not gonna taste it. So just like this. Most of the meat's on the top. So, you know, a lot of people would be like, well, you know, why would I put rub on the bottom? You know, it's just sometimes when you take that bite, you get the underbite of it. So you're just trying to, you know, if you're a real perfectionist, then the bottom's important too. So first I'm gonna start with this Kansas sweet. So on ribs, I personally don't like anything real savory. There's a little bit of, so there's like onions and bell peppers, and there's a little bit of pepper in here. But on pork, personally, I like pork sweet. And then with beef, I like a little bit of savory. But quite honestly, I'm not a big pepper person when it comes to barbecue. I know if you're in Texas, that would be sacrilegious. But but I really like sweet on pork. So this is gonna be, we're gonna use two different types of rubs here. So this is our Kansas City sweet. So this has a little bit more savory in it. So you're just gonna do a light coat, because what we're gonna do is we need to leave room for the other rub. So, especially because it's the bottom, so you don't really need to, it's great for presentation. So, to have the rub on the bottom there. Okay, so I just did enough, since we're doing the bottom. So you just do the sides, just a little bit. Okay, so that's basically it. So I don't tamp it in. You just kind of let it sit for a second, and it'll naturally, like the sugars, in the pork rubs, it always has a little bit of sugar or brown sugar. So it'll just naturally kind of just blend in. And then I have this touch of cherry. So you know, you really taste the cherry, and it smells pretty good. This one has brown sugar and sugar, and then onions, garlic, and a little bit of chili pepper. I said pepper before, but I think none of these have like actual pepper. This one's got chili pepper. And then of course they all have the paprika in it because that's what gives it its brown color. So I'll just go like this. You can already see it's kind of starting to melt in there. This one is not as fine as the other one. For me personally, this touch of cherry is really what gives it its sweetness, its sweet flavor. So we're just gonna just do the sides here. And then I got the sides here. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip this over. I mean, really, you should probably just let it sit for a second. But in the interest of time here, I'll just flip it over. Okay. And then just do the same thing. Gonna put some mustard. Just gonna rub that in. One thing about meat is that a lot of people, in the barbecue world, they think that like the fat will soak in, but then you have these guys who are basically these barbecue guys that are like scientists, and they say that so water, the moisture in meat is being pushed out. So all the fat, unless you inject it, the meat or the fat on the outside is just coating the outside of the meat, which is good too. Tastes good. So that's just kind of what we're doing. You're coating the outside so that when you take that first bite, you get your palate tastes that rub and then that fat and that other stuff. So that and then when you go into the meat, then you have the natural flavor of the pork. So okay. So I've got my rub on there, or the mustard. I'm gonna do, again, start with my Kansas City sweet. Okay, and that's good enough. And then you could just let it sit for a sec, but then we're gonna take our touch of cherry. You really can't over season these things, because the extra seasoning will just come off and it'll burn. Okay, so what'll happen now is that it will, as it sits, I'll probably I'm gonna put it in the fridge now because I want my ribs to be as cold as possible when I put them on the smoker. And I've already got the smoker going, getting up to temperature, and so that way it's ready to go. You know, it's heating up while I'm doing this. But I'll probably put these in for only about 15 minutes and kind of no more than 30 minutes. And then that way when you put them on, they're as cold as possible, and then they're getting as much smoke as possible. So I'm gonna do these other two here, and then I'll show you we'll come back when we put them on the smoker. So we've let the ribs sit for about 15 minutes in the fridge. My smoker, it's on, this is a Camp Chef, so it's just like a Traeger, they're all kind of the same. And I've got it on high smoke. So high smoke for the Camp Chef is around 225. Normally you could do ribs around 250 and be just fine. So if you do them at 250, you're probably around 4.5 hours. but at 225 we're more like 6 hours. But the way that the Camp Chef is designed, then you get the most smoke for your buck if you do high smoke. It's designed to produce more smoke at that setting. So that's what we're gonna do, and it's Sunday and I've got all the time in the world, right? So 6 hours is no big deal. So what I'm gonna do is, if you look here, it's already kind of melted in. So I'm gonna take this touch of cherry and I'm just gonna kind of put a little extra on it. It'll stick now because that other seasoning or rub has already gone in. So what we're gonna do on these is that we're gonna do more like today, like a sticky rib. So sticky rib, all that is that we're gonna put sauce on the end, and then we're going to put a little bit of honey and butter. So it just makes them sweeter, a little bit more sticky. So if you see here on the rib, you've got most baby backs, you have a thinner side, and then you have like a fatter side, or where the meat is thicker. And so you want to take your thick side of your ribs and put it towards this side right here, so towards where the pellets are. And because for some reason, and I'm not quite sure, but for some reason this side near where the pellets are is hotter. So okay, we're all ready to go. So I'm going to take, so you see here's the thick side. I don't want to mess up my rub on the outside, so I try not to touch the top. And then, see, if you look at this one has this meat flab. I elected to leave it because it's pretty thick there, and that'll be good. That'll taste good. I'll just cut it off at the end when we're done, and then. But so pick the thick side, put it there. And then here's our thick side. Okay, you see that, so I put them in the middle. I have 3 of them, so I try to put them in about the same position. You know, sometimes if you're doing, like, say you were doing 5, you wouldn't be able to put them all in the same position, but just remember that those ribs that are closer to here, to the pellet box, are going to cook quicker. Okay, so if this way, when they're all the same, they're all going to kind of finish about the same time. So that's it. So I will not check these for at least 4 hours now. So that's pretty easy. It's a pretty easy Sunday meal. I'll come out and I'll check the heat, make sure that, and maybe check on the pellets. With the pellets, you probably could go easily this whole time without putting any new pellets in. So, but I'll just make sure the temperature is keeping up the temperature, and in about 4 hours I'll check them. Hey, so we are now at the 4-hour mark for our ribs. So I'm just going to check it. I've been checking the temperature. I checked it like 2 or 3 times to make sure that it's maintaining temperature. So we've been at around 221 to 226, and that's about normal for a pellet grill. So I'm gonna check it now. Okay. So we're looking good. You see that we have the kind of mahogany look on the ribs here. One of the things that you can tell when ribs are getting done is that you'll start to see pullback on the bones. So look here. So you see the rib line here? We're not seeing any real, you can start to kind of see the rib, but you're not seeing any real pullback yet. When these are ready to go, you'll see I don't know what a centimeter of pullback, kind of a little bit of pullback on those. But these are looking good. We're probably still another, well, at least an hour, and then probably about an hour, I'll come and check these again and see what our pullback is. The real test for ribs is that we're going to put them upside down and then check and see if we see pullback on the bones. For ribs, the big difference that makes the difference between good ribs and not so great ribs is how done they are. There's a fine line between when they're underdone, they're done right, and then when they're overdone. So one of the things I didn't mention before is that we are using cherry pellets. So you can use like a soft, what they call like a mild or a softwood. So cherry, pecan, some of those types. So those are what they call like a sweeter wood. The other woods that you probably wouldn't want to use is definitely, you don't want to use like a mesquite. Really, out of all of them, I think mesquite's the one. Hickory is a little bit stronger, but you could use it if you like that. But mesquite's the real one that if you use that, then it would be like a very strong, savory taste. We're looking for something a little bit milder and sweeter for pork. Okay, we will check back here in about an hour. Okay, so we are now actually at 6 hours and 15 minutes. So it took a little bit longer, and that happens. Barbecue is not an exact science, so you have to just check and see when it's done. So if we look here, so you look here at the ribs, you can kind of see the rib there. That's with the pullback I was telling about. And then one of the other way to figure out if it's done is you just kind of flip it over, and then so here you start to see the bone, the meat pull away from the bone, kind of like right there. So that's and then when both ends, you pull in the middle, and both ends they touch the grill like that, it's definitely done. So again, there's a fine line between done and overdone. So what you want to do is, you notice that I didn't wrap these at all. So a lot of people will wrap their ribs. I used to wrap my ribs in tin foil. I had put like sugar and stuff in there. But I've kind of evolved to a point where I like my ribs to have a little bite. So that means that you bite into the rib. When you pick up the rib, and then the meat doesn't fall off the bone. But then when you bite the meat off the rib, then it comes clean off the bone. So a lot of times you hear, like the saying goes, is fall off the bone ribs. But in reality, fall off, if you pick up the bone and it's falling right off, then your ribs are actually overdone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take these off, and then I'm going to sauce them, and then that'll be it. But let me take them off for a second here, and I'll show you how to sauce them. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to take this, and I'm going to turn it over, take this rack of ribs, and then you see the color, the deep mahogany color there is exactly what you want. But here I have I can't believe it's not butter, and then I have my honey, and then I like to use a real sweet sauce. I've got two different types of sauces here. This Heath Riles, he's like a professional barbecue guy. And then this is a local one that I got actually at a gun show, but it's pretty sweet too. I think today I'm going to use this Heath Riles sauce. So these are going to be more like a Kansas City sticky rib. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of spray it, just a light spray, not too much. And then I'm going to take some honey, just not too much. Okay, just enough. And then I'm going to take some of this barbecue sauce here. and then just kind of spread it on. And then turn it over. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay. And then just a little bit of honey. And then this sauce. And then I will just spread it on. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it back on. And then what it will do is it will just tack it back up. So it kind of like stiffens it, and then it will be ready to go. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so I put these on the grill, I tacked them up. I did have one more rack that was not quite done, so I just leave that on there a little bit longer. But this is more than enough for, we have like 7 people and we don't eat more than 2 racks. So, and then this will probably be done in about 15 minutes. That's the one thing, is that with barbecue, you just never know when it's gonna get done. And you have to do it to doneness, you can't do it to time for barbecue. You notice on these ribs, I didn't do temperature. Most other barbecue, I do the temperature. But with ribs, you have to do it to feel and doneness. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut these. So what I do is I take the rib, I'm going to turn it over. That way I can see the ribs. I'll put this one over here. And then you just take a really sharp knife that I've got here, and then you just follow the rib line. So just go that way, you follow the rib line and you get a really cut like that. So there you go. You can see the pink. That's the smoked one, and then the moisture that's in there. So there you go, and that's how to do baby back ribs.